United States, where President Donald Trump is being tested on three fronts: the biggest public health crisis in a century, the worst economic downturn in generations, and the largest civil unrest since the 1960s. Well, against this backdrop, President Trump has come in for severe criticism from his former Pentagon chief, Jim Mattis, who accused him of trying to divide America and for failing to provide what he called mature leadership. Well, Mathis, a retired Marine general, said he was both angry and appalled at the president's threat to use the military to crack down on US citizens taking to the streets. Well, the angry protests were triggered by the killing 10 days ago of George Floyd, a black man who suffocated when a white police officer knelt on his neck for 9 minutes. Well, charges against the now fired police officer have been escalated, and 3 of his colleagues have also been arrested. Well, let's get more analysis on this situation in the United States, and we can speak to our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, an awful lot to talk about here, but let's start by talking more about that criticism of President Trump by his former Defence Secretary James Mattis. Why is this important, and what kind of an impact do you see that potentially having on the president?
Well, a lot of people in the United States have been saying that they thought James Mattis was going to speak probably before this, but the rule in the US as far as the military is concerned is that it is apolitical. That's why military leaders don't generally speak out, even if they are in disagreement with what the president is asking them to do or what the government is telling them to do as well. It's only once they retire from military duty that they feel free to speak their minds. And I think that's why we can see that James Mattis has spoken now, visibly very angry about the current situation in the United States, the calls by President Trump to use military force to put down the protesters, his lack of empathy towards the death of George Floyd. I'll just read you a couple of extracts, if you like, of what James Mattis has said. "Never did I dream that troops taking the same oath would be ordered under any circumstances to violate the constitutional rights of their fellow citizens, much less to provide a photo op for the president." I was talking about the president's walk to St. Michael's Church in Washington the other day, where he was photographed holding a Bible. Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people and does not even pretend to try. So this is a very damning assessment from James Mattis, a man who President Trump heaped praise on and who was seen as one of the king linchpins of Donald Trump's presidential brigade when he first took office, and then who resigned over President Trump's decision to withdraw US forces from Syria without informing him first. So damning assessment from James Mattis, and this comes hot on the heels of another comment by the current Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, who has said that he does not support in invoking the Insurrection Act, something that Donald Trump wants to do, saying that using active duty forces should only be used as a last resort, and we're not in that situation at the moment. So 2 key members of the Pentagon, one a former member, one a current member, who are speaking out. The question now, everybody is saying, well, there are 2 questions. The first one, is this going to have an impact? And the second one, will other people now start to speak out as well?
Yeah, Philip, as we've been saying, the president facing 3 major crises at once: the economic downturn, the handling of the coronavirus outbreak, and the handling of the civil unrest following on from the death of George Floyd. I mean, major challenges on multiple fronts. Who can the president still rely on for support?
Well, there is quite widespread support. If you look at the opinion polls in the United States for Donald Trump, he's still not far off his highest opinion poll ratings. This is not the latest opinion polls over the last few days. We'll see what those give once the current situation has been questioned about amongst the American people. But he's been pretty high recently. Well, of course, he can still depend on Vice President Mike Pompeo and on the Secretary of State, on Mike Pence, rather, and on the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who are 2 of his strongest supporters. Within the Republican Party, there is pretty wide support, but there are chinks beginning to show in the armor, with some Republican governors, for example, refusing to obey Donald Trump's orders to do away with the lockdown in their states and to open up the economy. There have been some Republicans who will give lip service to what Donald Trump says, but behind his back will not agree with him at all. But I think there is a general notion within the Republican Party that if they don't agree with Donald Trump, they're going to incur his wrath, and that means he'll go on Twitter and he will try to demolish them. And I think there is general fear that that is what could happen if they turn against the president. Now, of course, there's one other group which is quite influential in the United States. That's the evangelical white Christians whom Donald Trump is trying to keep on his side. That explains why he went to the church the other day with that Bible in his hand. That explains why he's in favor of the annexation of parts of the West Bank in the Middle East. It appears for the moment that they are still willing to support Donald Trump, but we'll see how this pans out in the next few days about how his handling of the unrest in the United States and the coronavirus pandemic are perceived by his voters.
Okay, and of course, the election in the United States is looming about 5 months from now, just under, in fact. What are the polls saying then about how President Trump is doing compared to his presumed rival, Joe Biden?
Well, Donald Trump is said to be upset and miserable about the way that things are going in the United States. At the end of last year, everything looked quite rosy for his re-election. There was no coronavirus pandemic. The economy was doing quite well. That's all sort of fallen by the wayside since then, and Joe Biden is now given quite a strong lead, average of 7 points, but even one poll at Monmouth University giving him an 11-point lead over Donald Trump by 52 to 41%. So the president losing support overall, but we're still quite a few months away from that presidential election in November. So Donald Trump will try very hard to claw back his support, but certainly at the moment, things are not looking too good for him.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Our International Affairs Editor, Philip Tell, thank you so much.